Hey everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity, and I am joined by Brandon, also of Hail Varsity, and it's a little bit late. So I can't tell you really where my brain is at this point, but Nebraska has just defeated Rutgers. We have heard from Scott Frost and a number of players. Brandon, how are you? Where is your head at right now? Where are you at right now?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing better than I probably thought I would be. Based on how the first half had gone for Nebraska, I was having dark thoughts about what a dark and cold offseason we were headed for. And I mean, my whole like mantra and way of being is one game, whether it's for the good or the bad, shouldn't probably have that much impact. It probably shouldn't change your mind on that many things, but this was a team that really needed a win to head into what is probably the off season. You know, the players were asked about potential for a bowl game. I think that chance will be there, but Scott Frost didn't make it sound like they're going to leave it up to the players. And, you know, Adrian Martinez said he hasn't seen his family since March. He was one of those guys that didn't go home at any point. It would be a tough call to make, I think, for them to keep playing. So this, for all intents and purposes, is probably what I'm thinking will be the last time we see this team in 2020.
Yeah, and we actually talked about this on the Varsity Club podcast this week. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, even though you may feel like, why do I want to listen to a podcast previewing? Trust me, go listen to it. It's still very good. We did talk about what would we prefer if we're Scott Frost. Would you play a bunch of young players for the experience side of it, or would you just do everything you can to get the win? And honestly, when you're looking at this potentially being the last game for a very long time, we don't have any idea when spring football will begin. We don't know anything about a spring game. We don't know if Nebraska will go to Ireland. It sounds like they plan to, as long as it can happen. But I mean, when you have really no answers on the other side of this offseason, going in with a win, in my opinion, is far more valuable than the extra reps that a couple of young players would get. So, you know, they did get some reps for younger players, especially on the offensive line. But overall, I think a win is going to be more impactful long term. And that really hasn't changed for me, at least, since we talked about it a few days ago.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, most likely, you know, Nebraska would be looking at probably playing next week. I mean, it would be
Right.
basically like right into another game week. Coach Frost mentioned that in post game that, you know, they had 5 days to get ready for this one. Do you want to, can your team handle doing that again? It would be, there's just a lot that kind of stacks up here that makes me think, you know, particularly because Nebraska won, maybe if they'd lost, you have a little bit like, well, we don't want to go out that way. But yeah, it's been a long, tough year. And, you know, it was really interesting post game with Coach Frost too. You know, he wasn't kind of as excited as we've seen him be post wins. You know, not that he usually conveys that in the press conferences themselves, but you know, you really felt, I think, for the first time, totally, or at least I did, kind of the toll just this year with everything it entailed took on him and certainly the team.
Yeah, and you know, that's something that I have thought about quite a bit. So when the whole movement for players where they wanted to play, and I understand a lot of that attention gets turned to Nebraska because there were lawyers involved, and so a lot of attention does get turned to Nebraska. But this wasn't just Nebraska. I mean, you had Trevor Lawrence making a giant call for the opportunity to play a 2020 season. And I think hindsight is always 2020 because I don't think anyone really probably could have understood the mental toll that this would take. You're talking about games getting canceled, postponed, seasons getting completely moved beyond what they normally would be. I mean, Nebraska was playing a home game in December for the first time, the latest home game in Nebraska football history this season. That stuff adds up when you're talking, you haven't seen your family in a long time, and the grind is just so significant, and you're not able to do normal student things. You're not going to class like normal. You're not getting to go hang out with your friends like normal. You're not even getting to go to like a party or to a bar, which I understand, like maybe as a fan, it's easy to say, well, they should be locked in and focused, but you have to have outlets to blow off steam and to not only have this be your entire life. And so when you think all of that was gone, for myself, I think we could have predicted that, you know, a few months ago, but maybe not to the degree now that they have lived it. Now that they've actually lived through this, it's like, oh yeah, this was a lot harder than I think anyone probably saw coming.
Yeah, definitely. And, I kind of wrote, well, it was part of a story that in the December issue of Hail Varsity, which is out now, came out this week, that we don't really have any idea of like what it took to actually do this. And that's part of it that I think will come out like in the months ahead in the spring, to just kind of try and get an understanding of like how hard it must have been. And that's true of all teams. It's not unique to Nebraska. It's just credit to them. I think I give them credit anyway for not dwelling on that a ton, when it would have been pretty easy to. And hopefully kind of getting a win here, whether it's the last game or it's not, yeah, it was Rutgers, but for a while there, you're kind of looking at, is Nebraska the worst team in the Big Ten?
And I mean, Rutgers, to be fair, I mean, they're not, top of the Big Ten, but that team has made a pretty good turn in the last year. So I think you have to feel pretty good about, honestly, the game plan that Nebraska had, at least in the second half against Rutgers, I personally think would have beaten Minnesota.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of that game plan and just really like committing to power football, just really pound the ball, wear the opposing defense down, because we started to see Rutgers defenders down almost every single play because they were getting exhausted. Now, obviously weather was a factor too. It was very, very cold. I mean, on the TV broadcast, I kept commenting, you saw all of the players, their breath so far in front of them. That's how cold it was. But I mean, they did what they needed to do, which was wear that defense down. So it might not have been the most sexy score in the end, but it was exactly what they needed. And I think that would have beat Minnesota. It may have even made Illinois look different. But for whatever reason, that power football didn't come out until potentially the last game of the season. So then you kind of wonder, well, where was that all year? At least in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. 384 rushing yards today for Nebraska when you take out the sacks and the kneel downs. 53 carries, which is by far the most like committed to the run that we had seen them be. So they were at over 7 yards a carry. This game, like even in the first half, which was defined by those turnovers, Nebraska was moving the ball. It was just kind of the old familiar Nebraska. I think a lot of Husker fans have grown to hate over the past couple of years, because you can see it. You can see it working, but it's just you have those 5-6 mistakes, whether it be a penalty or like big ones. Four turnovers, 3 of those in the first half, I believe. Like, you can't do that.
No.
So even though you see Nebraska moving the ball up and down the field, and I always felt like Nebraska was going to be able to move the ball. It's like, but can they not do something dumb? Can they hold on to the football long enough to find the end zone? They have 3 90-yard touchdown drives in the second half.
It's amazing. And also, I don't think Adrian Martinez is ever going to play a cold football game with sleeves again in his life. I actually made a joke about it on Twitter that at some point after the second fumble, he was on the sideline and they cut his sleeves off. I joke that he like ripped them off, but like legitimately they got rid of the sleeves, and you could even see it in his post-game interview right afterward, where you could see the scissor or the tear marks. And, those are little things where we talk about ball security, but there's a reason that Ryan Held does not allow his running backs to wear sleeves in a game. So if your quarterback is going to run as much as you are going to, as much as Adrian was going to run, you have to treat him like a running back. Then he probably shouldn't have gone out there with sleeves on. Maybe it wouldn't have fixed everything. It's not like that fixes an interception, but at least it might have helped prevent one of the fumbles. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say he'll never play a cold game in sleeves ever again in his career.
I think you're probably right. It was certainly a memorable moment. It's crazy how Nebraska continues to do this. So over 600 total yards of offense. It's hard to only score 28 points when you put up that many. Just Nebraska became the 12th team since 2000 to do that. Just the third one to win. So gain 600 plus yards and score 28 or fewer. Like that's kind of the story of the season, because you'll look at some of these numbers like yardage based or play based, which I look at a lot, and it all looks pretty decent for the most part. But then you look at the scoring, and so Nebraska got to 28 points. They're going to be under 25 points per game on the season. It's that has to get fixed in the offseason. Defensively, though, quite a lot to like, I thought, tonight from this group. Rutgers they have a really fun and kind of inventive offense. I really like their offensive coordinator. Took some shots and hit some shots, did pretty well in the big play department, but Nebraska defensively held them to 4.8 yards per play. And really the kind of defining feature was, I think there were like 4 drives that ended in Nebraska territory, but like right around the 40-yard line, the 45-yard line. So they really did what they had to do in terms of like just stiffening up when it looked like, Rutgers was driving and going to have a chance to score. They kind of kept them out of range most of the time. So pretty good from defense. What did you see on that side?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought all season long the defense is not perfect. And I understand there is a fair amount of criticism about the defense and how there needs to be things that are better. I get it. But I do think the defense has held up its end of the deal most of the time this season. And that's probably more of the frustrating part, because if you are that defense and you are holding up your end of the deal, and you just can't stay off the field because you get this big stop and then the offense immediately goes 3 and out, that is an incredibly frustrating thing to have to deal with. Because when we talk about Rutgers getting tired against Nebraska tonight, that's the same thing that happens to any defense. So if the offense isn't doing the defense any favors, it doesn't matter how good your defense is, they're going to get tired. So I thought the defense overall, for only having 3 wins in a season, held up its end of the bargain for the most part. Now, is there room for improvement? Of course, but considering we went into this season, honestly, everything I thought about this season almost flip-flopped, with the exception of, like, when we talk about offense, wide receivers was still a big question mark, still is, doesn't really make any sense. But when we talked about like the offensive line, we thought it was going to be a point of strength. It ended up being anything but. When we look at the defense, here we were like concerned about the defensive line, and the defensive line has actually probably been a brighter spot for the defense, whereas the secondary has had more concerns at times. It's kind of wild to think how what we thought we knew about, especially the defense, ended up almost being flip-flop. Now, the secondary was fine too. They had many shining moments. It's not taking anything away from them. But I would say I was pretty impressed overall this season with what that defensive line was able to do. And that line is fairly young outside of Ben Stille. So you have to feel pretty good if you're Tony Tuioti.
Yeah, I think so. Pitched a shutout in the second half. The only touchdown for Rutgers was the maddening kickoff return to Aaron Cruikshank, who took one to the house last year
Which
against
they
Nebraska.
did not mean to kick to him, by the way. That was probably the best. We didn't mean to kick to him.
Yeah, that was a tough one for Big Ten Kicker of the Year, Connor Culp, but he's had a really good year. I'm kidding mostly, but yeah, one of the things that was different about this game is plays wise, and I think Nebraska ran something like 84, and Rutgers was at only 53. So you had a fresh defense, at least compared to what we've seen a lot this year. Maybe to kind of wrap things up here, I guess, as we turn the page to the season ahead, which feels a little bit strange to say, but after this big win, where do you think Nebraska should be ranked in the preseason top 25?
I mean, if they're not in the top 10, I just, if nothing else, I hope that Nebraska can walk away from this season. And some fans are going to say, well, this is silly. They should have felt this way last year, the year before. But I hope there's a level of being humbled by this because there are some significant things that have to get sorted out. Turnovers is absolutely something that Nebraska has to figure out this offseason. Tackling is a really important thing, especially as we look at how many times did a defender not wrap up and tackle this year. But that is not a new problem. That is something that has happened for years. So when you're looking at what can Nebraska do in the offseason to put itself in a position to, not be ranked in the top 25, but at least get some excitement going, it needs to work on those turnovers. It needs to work on tackling. It has to figure out whatever the disconnect is between the quarterback and the receivers, whatever that is. But also maybe Nebraska just needs to run the ball more. Maybe that's just what it is, at least right now. I mean, if that's what works and that's what's going to get you where you need to go, maybe that's not the offense Nebraska wants to run. But if it gets you a win, I just think Nebraska can use this now into the offseason to really reflect on and hopefully humble itself and figure out what does this team need to do to be successful? Because there are moments where you're like, okay, I see it when Frost says we're close to turning the corner. I can kind of see it, but it's not consistent enough. And until those little things start to become habit and you don't worry about them anymore, we're going to be listening to the same thing forever. So for me, this offseason really now is just about fix those things. Finally fix those things.
Yeah, the off season for me is entirely about like, how do you exhibit some control? Because when I think about the 3 years the 3 seasons now that we've had with this staff, like it feels like Nebraska is, I don't know if this is the right word, but like a victim all the time, and a victim of its own doing. But like, why do the turnovers remain like so one-sided? And turnovers can be pretty random, but like a lot of the turnovers that Nebraska has committed over that span don't feel entirely that way.
Penalties, and I understand if you're a fan, there have been some bad calls and missed calls against Nebraska, but some of them are just Nebraska's doing, and that's just, again, cleaning those things up.
Yeah, it's sort of, Nebraska had a couple games that could have gone the other way pretty easily this year, I think. Well, maybe not easily, but you look at Northwestern and Iowa, the top 2 teams in the division, and Wisconsin kind of had a weird season, so I wouldn't write them off by any means. They were a good team too. Nebraska didn't get to play them, but 2 one-score losses in those games, like you figure if they play a regular, if they were able to play all 12 games, you probably get 2 wins. I mean, it's so hard to even like take anything for granted with this program at the moment, but yeah, you probably beat Central Michigan and South Dakota State, but I wouldn't write those in stone, but figure you get 2 wins out of there, you're looking at 5, basically 5 and 6 at that point. If one of those games flips, 6 and 6 would feel like it would only be a 1-game improvement over the previous year, but then you would have earned bowl eligibility. So are they close? Yeah. Are the problems that keep them from being there persistent? Absolutely. And that's the challenge going into next year. And it's a big one. Like, it's going to take some real kind of self-reflection of how do we eliminate these uncertainties, and that's really coaching. That's all it is like, how can you coax kind of consistent performance out of a group of players? And that's true for any sport, and it's not an easy one to answer.
I do not envy the job that this team and the coaches have ahead of them. I will say, if you are a fan wondering what's next, it was pretty telling that when we ended the post-game availability, they said, if we don't talk to you again because this is it, have a happy holidays. And it hit me where I was like, yeah, this absolutely could be it for a while. And we're talking about really everything is unclear at this point. So I think for right now, it's okay if you're a fan to enjoy this win. At the same time, I think it's okay if you feel like it comes with an asterisk and there's a lot of questions associated with it. I think all of that is fair. it's going to be a long time before we start to get any new answers if there isn't a bowl game. So at least it'll go into whatever this is with a win.
Yeah, it'll be a strange offseason. I think there's going to be the potential for across the country for like a lot of movement, just with the eligibility clock basically stopped. I think by the time we get to spring football and then even after that, things could feel significantly different. And I have no idea, I don't really have a lead one way or the other with any of the seniors, whether they come back, whether they go, I'm not talking about attrition, but you're always going to have attrition in the off season. So it's going to be interesting on that front, just personnel wise, to see what Nebraska actually looks like in 2021.
And the transfer portal had like over 200 players in it as of the last time I asked about it. So it's definitely going to be an interesting offseason for sure. Obviously, Nebraska can't take 200 players, but there's opportunity to maybe really take a look. So I appreciate your time. If you have joined us all season, don't worry. We will continue doing these videos. As you know, basketball season is about to get into full swing with Big Ten play. Volleyball season will be here before we know it. And football will return. Football is never gone in Nebraska. So if you're looking for more of this type of content, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will continue to post, and we'd love to have you join us along the way. Make sure that you're following us on all of our social media, so that way we can just check in with you until we know what the future holds. But we appreciate it. Brandon, I appreciate your time. I think we all need to go to bed now.
Got to write a column first. And it's College Football Saturday, at least for me. Happy College Football Saturday.
It's true. So, hey, bookmark halvarsity.com. We may all be sleep deprived together, so that's fine. We'll talk to you later.